Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I'm doing a Star Trek video here, but this is actually based on my recent Star Frontiers video, where I talked about one of the aliens in my campaign, and among the various things that I touched on was Star Trek the Animated Series. And I thought to myself, I've done quite a few Star Trek related videos, but I've never talked about the animated series, and I watched it when it was new back in the 70s, and I thought, I should maybe revisit the animated series. I keep calling it the animated series, even though, according to some sources, when it first aired, it was just called Star Trek. Like, Gene Roddenberry had kind of just decided, this is Star Trek. Now, does he think it's canon? Not really. Then he changed his mind. There's a whole convoluted history to the animated series, but I'm just going to keep calling it the animated series because that's what I'm used to. And I saw it when it was brand new, and I thought to myself, at that time, one thing that really stood out to me is you could do so much with the cartoon. It was capable of stuff that the original actual on-film live actors version of the 60s just was never capable of. So I just wanted to very quickly just touch on Star Trek, what I'm calling the animated series. Now, it was only 22 episodes, ran in the mid-70s. I have done a little bit of research into this, and apparently what had happened is NBC had realized around the early 70s, hey, this show that we axed back in the 60s is actually super, super popular now that it's in syndication. Maybe we should think about revisiting this, and it sort of led to a variety of things like Star Trek Phase 2, if anybody's ever read up on that. But when they first addressed it, they thought, okay, we need to do this low budget. We need to make sure that, because all of the sets from the original series are gone, destroyed, parts sold off, whatever happens. Now, to rebuild all that stuff, that would be expensive. So price tag was key, and they thought, no, we're not doing, at least not initially, we're not doing a rebuild of all of that stuff. But how could we do Star Trek, low budget, affordable, and somebody had the brilliant idea, hey, let's go to Filmation. Those guys do cartoons, and they can do it on a pretty good budget. Yes, let's do a cartoon Star Trek. Interestingly now, as I say, only 22 episodes, they managed to gather up a lot of the original cast to do the voice acting, which is pretty impressive. But as you can see here from the pictures of the crew that are in the cartoon, there's no Chekhov. What's that all about? Well, apparently, in rounding up the original cast, the bean counters had decided, we really need to watch our money on this one, so what we'll do is we'll get Shatner and Nimoy and DeForest Kelley and James Doohan and Nichelle Nichols. James Doohan, by the way, has a huge career built on different voices, different accents, all of this kind of stuff. He's done quite a few episodes in the original series as voiceover work for different aliens that they met. So I think what they were thinking is, we don't really need to get George Takei and Nichelle Nichols and Walter Koenig. We could probably get probably get Majel Barrett to do the voice for Uhura, and Jimmy Doohan, who can do a lot of voices, he can do Sulu. Yeah, we don't need to get the other members of the crew. And Leonard Nimoy, God love him, he went to the ropes for Nichelle Nichols and George Takei. He said, no, they have to be in this series. We need them. From what I've heard, he understood at that time they were not in the best finances, with the cancellation of the series. And so he really fought to make sure that Uhura is voiced by Nichelle Nichols and George Takei is going to do Sulu. But I guess, maybe because Chekhov was introduced in the second season, lesser standing compared to the originals, I don't know. But it sounds like the approach was, well, we don't really need Walter. And so they didn't have Chekhov in the animated series, which is a bit crummy. Walter Koenig has talked about he didn't feel great about that. They did approach him for doing some of the writing, and he did he did at least one amazing episode in the animated series, so kudos to Walter for turning a negative into a positive, to quote Star Trek The Next Generation. However, that does leave, from the creative casting point of view, that does create a hole on the bridge of the Enterprise. Who's going to be in that checkoff position? And somebody thought, we should get us some aliens on this thing. Let's get a couple of really odd-looking human-ish creatures that can fill those points. And that's what I really liked about the animated series. They suddenly realized, hey, we don't have to put men in suits. We don't have to throw together some bubble wrap and twine and make an alien spaceship. We've got the capability with animation to do stuff you couldn't do in the original series or anything on film back in the 70s. This is a great opportunity, and they really ran with it. In Chekhov's position is Eryx, which is this three-legged, three-armed alien creature, and that's an interesting, bold choice. From a physical point of view, how are you going to manage with 3 arms? One's sticking right out of his middle of his chest. Okay. How are you going to do 3 legs? They did it, and yeah, okay. Apparently, in researching for this video, I found out, the animators didn't ever have a way to make Eryx walk correctly, and so as a result, you only ever see him in a seated position or occasionally floating in zero gravity. And that's it. You never saw Eryx walking, so that's kind of funny. And I've already talked about Lieutenant Ensign Maress. Cation or Katian? A cat lady, basically, is what she is. She was in Uhura's position. So now you've got, okay, there's some aliens on the bridge, in addition to Spock, who was always there. But, it isn't just somebody wearing pointy ears. Now we've got creatures that are very noticeably not human. Awesome move, may I say. That was I think that was just the first thing that communicated to me, and I'm sure to any other kids watching the show, hey, this isn't 60s Star Trek. This has new capability, new creatures, new aliens. Fantastic. Loved that. Excuse me, Captain. Yes? Can I help you? Actually, just carry on. Okay. So that's a little reference to the very strange animation that Filmation would do for this cartoon, and their animation style was quite cheap. Again, the budget is king when it comes to making this show. And it kind of shows, if you were to watch this now, the original cartoon is very clunky and kludgy, by comparison to anything, even 10 years later with Transformers and G.I. Joe. The Star Trek 70s Filmation cartoons they're a rough watch. So if you're going to follow into this, if you're going to check this out, go with lower expectations. But you know what? Again, I got to give them kudos for what they were capable of doing. The fact that you had wide vistas and sprawling alien worlds, that made a really big difference, especially in the mind of a kid or any science fiction fan in that time. Remember, we're talking stuff that 60s or 70s, Lost in Space, Battlestar Galactica. You basically, what are your options if you're filming a science fiction show in Hollywood in that era? Well, we could go out to the desert, and that's about it. So you really didn't get a wide variety of different kind of landscapes. This Star Trek cartoon, you could do anything you want, and man, did they go to town. It's a little bit Alice in Wonderland in there at sometimes. Looks great, and really blows your mind. There is a funny interview with Walter Koenig about his role with the cartoon, and he actually had a really good point. He said, yeah, even Gene was not thrilled with some of the stuff that they dreamt up on the show. Quite often you would run into these talking vegetables. And I did laugh when I heard Walter say that, because I was like, yeah, I remember there's a lot of okay, here are these creatures that certainly don't look human, but there's some interesting choices. In addition, actually, there's a lot of pink and purple. The Klingons are wearing pretty disco purple outfits and stuff, and that's fabulous. I love what you guys are doing, but why? I heard on some YouTube video, I don't know if this is true or not, but not the art production crew, but the guy who like approves what you actually end up seeing, he was colorblind. And so the people who were like drawing up a lot of this stuff, they intentionally threw a lot of pink and purple in there. I don't know if it's to mess with the guy or if they just thought, hey, we got all this pink and purple in the paint cans that are not getting used compared to all the other colors. Let's throw that out there a few times. So if you're wondering why there's such an overabundance of pink and purple in the Star Trek show, apparently that was because the guy approving all of what you ended up seeing was colorblind and he didn't notice or something. But I will end off on a really positive note for the cartoon, and that was the writing. And apparently there's a reason for this that is somewhat topical. As of the filming of this video, in Hollywood right now, we have the writer's strike and the actor's strike going on because they want to get better pay, and I am totally in support of the artists. Apparently, in 1973, there was also a writer's strike going on, but because the contracts that those guys had was to do with television and film, animation, cartoons, didn't count, or at least there was like a clause of like, yeah, you can write for animation, that's fine. So you ended up, according to DC Fontana and various other sources, you ended up with like award-winning science fiction writers, people who I think maybe wrote on the original series, doing cartoon episodes. And it's like, wow, that's not only impressive, but like that would explain why there are some pretty deep thinking, highbrow episodes in the original cartoon series. It's quite impressive, actually. So there you go. Sometimes another positive can come out of a negative. If there's a writer's strike going on, maybe the writers will come over to this cartoon show, since it's just for kids, and elevate it into genuine, proper science fiction. The cartoon series does have quite a following out there in the Trek universe, so I'm very pleased to have like just touched on it briefly here. I thought it was awesome, and I'm just glad to just bring it up. It's not something that's mentioned very often in the Star Trek world. All right, well, I'm going to stop there. Helm, execute, take us to our next destination, and that guy can stop sticking his head in the frame. Until next time, I'll see you down the rabbit hole.